Music was Dad's life. Anyone who knew John McCoy knew that. From the moment he first held a trumpet in his hands as a young schoolboy until the day he died, my dad would eat, sleep, and breathe music.
He started on trumpet a little later than most of us. He didn't start until he was in the 8th grade. And he fell in love with the fact that he could do this very well, and it became an extension of him. The trumpet really was an extension of him as a person, a personality, and he did treat the trumpet like it was, almost like it was human.
Johnny McCoy was born on July 5, 1925 in Ironton, Ohio. He was the oldest child of Ray and Margaret McCoy. A few years later, his younger brother Bobby McCoy was born. Johnny and Bobby spent their growing up years in Ironton. When he was in high school, he formed his own jazz band. It was for fun and practice more than anything else. Then, somewhere along the line, he met and fell in love with Mary Vulgaris, and suddenly, the trumpet had a little bit of competition to contend with. But it was all cool because Mary played piano, and he recruited her to play with his group. After his graduation from Ironton High School in 1943, John and Mary continued their courtship, and they got engaged that fall. John had already enlisted in the United States Army Air Corps as an air cadet. With a world at war and things looking very grim, they decided to go ahead and get married as soon as possible. On February 19, 1944, Johnny McCoy and Mary Vulgaris were married in a military ceremony in Williamsburg, Pennsylvania. Even while serving in the Army Air Corps during wartime, John continued to play his music and entertain. Later on, with the war behind them, John made a living as a professional musician. They traveled a lot, and Mary would go along on these trips. After their son was born in 1946, they continued to travel, and they'd take little Kenny along with them. He thought it was a normal life.
I would not have known if it was anything different than anybody else's. As far as I knew, everybody else did exactly the same thing I did. Was out on the road going to New York City and going to Scranton, Pennsylvania and Ypsilanti, Michigan and all those places. I didn't know where I was. I just knew that I was with Mom and Dad, and occasionally Mom and I would go to the club where he was playing that night. So that's basically really what it boiled down to. I was immersed in his profession.
Then, after daughter Judy was born in 1952 and Kenny was starting school, the demands of marriage and parenting got to be too much of a burden to continue that kind of lifestyle.
So Dad got a degree in music education from Marshall University and settled into teaching music instead. His first teaching job was as a band director at Rock Hill High School near Ironton, Ohio. But Dad never could let go of the entertainer in him.
So in 1954, he formed the McCoy Brothers Orchestra with his brother Bob and just limited the travel schedule while he continued to teach. Their band sometimes shared venues with really well-known artists, including such greats as the Dorsey Brothers and Edie Gourmet.
The band played very well. We were probably the only band that would work 4 hours and be very exhausted and come out laughing and smiling because we were all proud of what we had just done. Most bands came out griping because they didn't get paid enough or whatever, but ours was different and made it enjoyable.
During the summers, Dad would take the whole family with him when the McCoy Brothers Orchestra had long road trips far away from home. Their summer engagement at the Pleasure Pier in Galveston in 1957 is one of my favorite memories to this day. I was 5 years old at the time and Kenny was 10, almost 11. We stayed in a hotel right across the street from the beach for the whole summer. I think the highlight for me that summer was surviving Hurricane Audrey. I can remember sitting on the seawall with Dad the next day and looking at all the devastation that Audrey caused.
Then, in 1961, John moved the family to Greenville, Ohio, where he took a position as the junior high band director and became the supervisor of music for the Greenville City Schools.
He had that crew cut and he had that starch white shirt, just the way he did things, and you never thought about not paying attention. you hope that if someone made a mistake, it wasn't you. You hope it was the trombone section instead of the trumpets, or that sort of thing. But you knew if somebody made a mistake, it was like, okay, there's a lecture coming. Let's suck it up and take it like men, because we're going to get a lecture. But that's just the way he taught, and that again inspired you not to make mistakes, not to goof around, to pay attention to what was going on, and make him proud.
In 1963, he organized the Johnny McCoy Orchestra and played weekend gigs in Ohio and Indiana while he continued to teach full-time. During his years with the Greenville Band program, John's crowning achievement was when he organized and directed a stage band that eventually became nationally and internationally recognized. Jazz great Stan Kenton was so impressed with this high school group that he agreed to appear as a guest soloist in 1969.
And the concert went off very, very well. Stan was extremely receptive and very complimentary about the band. He said things such as, you never know what you're going to find when you get into a situation with students. He said, but I came in here and had the top of my head blown off, and he said, this is really something.
In the following years, other guest artists, including Clark Terry, Les Elgart, and Kai Winding, also appeared with the stage band.
Another big part of Dad's legacy is that dozens of his former students went on to play professionally or become band directors themselves, including his son and his son-in-law.
After John retired from teaching in 1974, he returned to playing professionally full-time. His gigs aboard the Delta Queen and the Mississippi Queen were a couple of Mary's favorites. She'd join him for cruises on the river during that time. The music was Dixieland, and they both had a really good time with it.
Dad and Mom eventually settled in Tampa, Florida, and Dad continued to play as a freelance musician. One of the shows he did that became one of my favorites was his Uncle Clyde McCoy's Sugar Blues Show. Over the years, it became apparent that the teacher part of Dad's DNA was an equal match for his entertainer genes.
John McCoy never missed an opportunity to offer a free music lesson to someone. In fact, a visit with his grandchildren and even his great-grandchildren often involved a free trumpet lesson.
Once or twice a day for 30 to 45 minutes, he'd either run through his drills or do part of the music that he was going to be playing for the next gig. And I really enjoyed, whether it be in Ohio when he was visiting us or whether we were down in Florida, I would look forward to those times of listening to my grandpa play.
3 years after John and Mary celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a big party for family and friends in 1994, John had to face what would be the most challenging time of his entire life. Life without his beloved Mary. Mary passed away suddenly on May 26, 1997. John was devastated, to say the least. He went to visit her grave faithfully until he was no longer physically able to. He always took his trumpet with him and played her favorite hymns right there in the cemetery.
Before he'd leave, he'd say a prayer and end it by saying, "Oh, and Jesus, if you see Mary today, tell her that I love her." When Dad passed away in 2007, at the age of 81, it seemed only appropriate that his trumpet go with him.
At the funeral, I played a recording of Tenderly that he played and put the trumpet in the casket with him and leaned over and kissed him and said, "Play good, play good up there."
Now it brings a smile to my face to think that maybe Dad is playing some gigs in heaven with the angel Gabriel. You never know.